I've been looking for a way to spice up my Don't Starve Together experience for a while now. I've played this game for a little over 1000 hours, and while that number isn't high compared to many others, it's enough to make the early game a little boring, for me at least. Because after you've played the game enough, starting in autumn is no longer a challenge. So I decided to do a slightly twisted winter start challenge with some world tweaks and equipment limitations, which I assumed are going to change my usual approach to the game, and I was right. I died a few times and was generally nervous throughout my attempts. I also intend to keep the world and continue playing it with set limitations. So without further ado, here's what I've done. As for world generation, nothing fancy. It's a winter start challenge after all, so starting season is set to winter. The only other option I tweaked here is branches, which I set to most. I've been always curious how branches and loops would affect world generation, so this was done for science. As for world settings, here's where things get interesting. Winter and summer are set to long, so now they last 22 days instead of 15. However, I should note that in case of a winter start, you enter the constant during the dead of winter. Pun intended, board game players. This is why I entered the world already 12 days into winter, and a spoiler alert, deer clubs didn't have enough time to spawn. Next is day type, which is set to long nights. I believe this tweak, along with winter naturally decreasing daytime, had the most impact on the difficulty of my attempts. There is very little that can be done during day and dusk, and I couldn't stay next to a campfire for the whole night. So I was forced to rely on my torch as the only source of heat and light while I set things on fire and continued exploring and gathering resources. Not to mention that came with its own challenges, but I managed to get over them at some point. One last option was tweaked both for the overworld and the caves, and that is grass gecko morphing, which was set to none. I'm sorry, but I don't like grass geckos, that's all, no hard feelings. I was also considering setting damage taken to more, but given the fact that Wes only has 75 health points, it felt scary and I left it unchanged. Everything else is the default settings. Last but not least, equipment limitations. There are certain items and tools which are crafted as soon as the player can get their hand on their crafting material. Almost all DST players, myself included, are so used to having these items they refuse to equip their alternatives. So in order to give myself a difficult time, I will not be using any equipment, item or structure that must be crafted using the loot of a seasonal boss. So no umbrella, luxury fan, lazy deserter, or insulated pack. Also, I will not be using any Mactusk loot, so no Tamu Shanter or walking cane. For armor, I will only use a grass suit and or football helmet. And lastly, for weapon, I'm allowed to use anything but a hambat. Of course, all of this would go to waste if I'm playing any character other than Wes. If you know, you know, but for those who don't, Wes is, if not the most, one of the most challenging characters to play in DST because of his many disadvantages. He has only 75 points for health, sanity, and hunger, deals 25% less damage compared to a standard character, and is less efficient when using an axe, pickaxe, or a hammer. Now that we know what we're dealing with, allow me to demonstrate my attempts. On my first attempt, I set foot in a rather unpleasant starting area. It's a good time to mention that I was away from the game for kind of a long time, so my apologies if I play a little rusty. Very quickly, I was able to craft a torch, and while I was waiting for my temperature to rise, I made myself a speedy balloon. I ended up not using that very much. I stumbled upon some berry bushes and was able to pick some for food, but that was about it. Night was upon me before I even knew it, and I was very confused as to what I was supposed to do. I barely had any time to gather resources and didn't have any tools. I already had a single flint but wanted to create a pickaxe first, so I really needed two, but I couldn't find any. So I decided to take what I can get and made an axe. I continued to gather resources, mainly logs, but for the life of me I couldn't find a single flint. I mean, I found one, but she said she had a boyfriend. Get it? Single? Boyfriend? No? Okay. Eventually my axe broke, and since I was kind of low on resources and was freezing very quickly, I decided to stay near my campfire for most of the night and tried to make my way to a rabbit hole before daytime. I tried to catch a rabbit with a trap, failed miserably, and did absolutely nothing for the third consecutive night. It felt bad. My plan was to gather starting resources, catch 2 rabbits so that I'm able to craft earmuffs, and then that would be enough to carry me to a thermal stone. Since that was failing, I turned to plan B. Now plan B was to first try to get to a magma pool near the dragonfly set piece, which I had discovered earlier. Using the magma pool, I'm able to get close to overheating temperature, and with repeated visits, I'm able to maintain a high temperature, gather nearby supplies, then continue with plan A. Sounds good? Heck no. As soon as I started moving, I also started freezing. I was able to catch a rabbit on the way, but that was about it. I barely made it to the set piece, and this is when I realized I had 3% remaining on my only torch and didn't have any grass to make a new one. I believe the magma pool emits enough light to keep you from Charlie, but also you're gonna burn to death. In hopes of finding grass, I left the set piece and stumbled upon yet another moose goose nest. With the last bit of my torch, I set a tree on fire and prepared to fight a nearby crawling horror, because I had gone insane. Having no weapon, I punched the crawling horror in the face, and that was it. My first run was ended by a crawling horror. On my second attempt, after spawning, I was immediately greeted with grass tufts. You know, the ones which I desperately needed at the end of my previous run to make a torch. Yeah, those. I picked up nearby supplies, but couldn't find no more than 1 twig. And wouldn't you know it, I immediately started freezing. I was looking for twigs when I came across a familiar eye bone? I'm gonna say this little guy brought me good luck, because shortly after I found some twigs and was able to make a torch. I wouldn't say it was the perfect start, but still. I had a little under 2 minutes before nighttime, so I kept on gathering supplies, but even after night came, I didn't stop looking because it was the same story as before. Had 1 flint, needed a pickaxe, needed another flint. And after some time, I actually found it. In fact, I'd been so lucky I found another one. Way to go, Chester! I also came across a mandrake, but didn't bother to pick it up. With my morale boosted like never before, I spent the rest of the night and the following daytime to gather as much resources as possible, until Chester was targeted by a tall bird and I started freezing again, almost killing myself. So I told Chester to stay and started mining nearby boulders. With the acquired gold, I made a science mission and decided to double check the ingredients needed to craft a thermal... What? Use an alchemy engine to build a prototype? Bro, since when does the thermal stone needs an alchemy engine for you to be able to craft it for the first time? Since always apparently, I've never ever checked before, because when I start in autumn, I have an alchemy engine by the time winter arrives. But hey, you live you learn, I suppose. So in a change of plans, I chose to craft earmuffs instead, but also decided to craft a shovel to dig up rabbit holes so I wouldn't waste any more time. Very soon I cut the rabbits and made the earmuffs, even though trying to burn an already burnt evergreen almost killed me. Earmuffs wasn't much, but it definitely was an improvement over nothing. Nighttime came once again, and since I didn't have much on my torch, nor did I have any grass to make a new one, sounds familiar? I opted to retreat to my previously made campfire, which I spent the entire night next to. Oh, I also avenged my own death. The following day, I got as warm as I could, told Chester to follow, and left my campfire in hopes of finding the ingredients needed to craft an alchemy engine. I came across a graveyard, great, and the loot stash. Hey Klaus, chopped some trees and moved on. Apparently I ate all of my food at some point because now I was hungry and insane. My torch was running out, so I made a campfire and was gonna kill a crawling horror when his friend showed up. I mean, fighting 2 shadows with an axe in a not well lit environment and an empty stomach? I guess it means death in my dictionary. 3rd time's the charm, right? After spawning, I immediately started looking for grass and twig to craft a torch as soon as possible. Looking back at the footage, I think it's funny how I didn't notice this set piece until later that day, even though my camera was fully zoomed out. I started freezing and even took a little damage, but I was able to craft a torch very quickly. After my temperature had risen, I harvested nearby grass tufts and berry bushes, picked up a failed survivor's loot, sorry friend, made an axe and started chopping down trees. I was having a bit of a spider problem but chose not to fight the little guy. I chopped down some more trees and came across the set piece that I hadn't noticed earlier. Wouldn't you know it, it contained a pickaxe which I happily took and walked away. Stop bothering me. Day 2 and everything's going really well. I had almost 2 stacks of logs, some grass, twig, flint, rock, and even found another failed survivor with 4 pieces of cut stone. I kept on with chopping trees down until I had 2 full stacks of logs. Did a dumb thing and tried to cook my carrots by placing them near a burning tree, rest in peace, destroyed the burned trees and collected some charcoal. I almost had everything I needed to make a science machine and an alchemy engine, except gold. So I started exploring to try and find some gold vein boulders. I realized that I had came across the savanna biome and quickly made a trap when I saw a couple of rabbits nearby. I cut the rabbits and made myself a pair of earmuffs and thought to myself, since I'm already in the savanna and have the earmuffs, I might as well gather a full stack of grass before leaving. The rest of dusk and some of my nighttime went to acquiring as much grass as possible. When I was satisfied with the amount, I made a campfire, cooked some berries, killed a shadow creature and continued with exploring the rest of the biome. I was being attacked by shadow creatures because my sanity was low and I didn't have anything to restore it. The next day I was hunting for food when a terrorbeak showed up. I was doing a good job kiting it, but I made one mistake and this happened. I had made so much positive progress this run, I wasn't going to give up. So I chose to try to find a touchstone and get back in the game. So I looked and looked and looked, and just when I thought that everything was over, nothing happened. I didn't find a touchstone. Sadly. But I was not one to quit. I decided to try the challenge one last time before giving up for that day. I definitely wasn't going to give up completely. After spawning, I was greeted with a variety of resources and even a cave entrance if I felt like it. I picked up whatever that was near me, even flower petals to make a garland at some point. I crafted a torch as well as coming across this. Now, have I told you that I don't like grass geckos? Juicy berries is another thing I dislike. Even though they're arguably better when each bush yields 3 berries instead of 1, together with each juicy berry restoring almost 20 hunger instead of 12.5 when cooked. Anyway, I moved around a little bit during dusk and found another moose goose nest, where I picked up some more juicy berries and decided it's better to leave some bushes unharvested, in case of a food shortage, since these berries spoil quick. I crafted a second torch and continued exploring at nighttime. I gathered enough petals to craft a garland along with an axe. I have to say, at this point in the run, I'm feeling very confident that I hadn't taken any damage since spawning. I kept on with gathering supplies, and by the dusk of day 2, I had a healthy amount of resources. I opened up a cave entrance, not because I wanted to enter the caves, not yet anyway, but because I needed the couple of flints it was going to give me. Hey, bee queen. I realized that I had found one of the 2 deserts, therefore chose to get my hands on some more logs, because entering the desert with enough logs meant I was able to make the alchemy engine followed by thermal stone almost immediately. So that's what I did. I spent the whole night picking up grasses and twigs in addition to chopping down lumpy evergreens. The following day, I was very pleased with the amount of logs, grass and twig that I had gathered. I also had some charcoal, tools, food. It was looking very good. I was mining my own business when a hound started attacking me, which in response I just walked away. Also, I left my pile of balloons because I needed inventory space. As I was running away from this hound, I realized there was a couple of hound mounds nearby. Plus, there might have been even more, so this place could have been very dangerous. Since the hound wasn't giving up, I killed it together with returning to my campfire, where I continued to mine nearby boulders. However, when I was mining near a group of pangolins, I was attacked by a number of hounds, and although I was able to get them to attack some of the pangolins, I was retargeted quickly because I think Wes is prioritized by hounds. Honestly, I believe this is where things could have gone very wrong, resulting in yet another failure. When hounds retargeted me, I started running away. This guy took a bite out of my butt, bringing me down to 28 health. My torch was also running out, so I set a cactus on fire and tried to craft another torch when it attacked me again, bringing me down to 10 health. I ran away for my life, and all of my failed tries flashed before my eyes. I set a spiky tree on fire along with making another torch, but I also made a campfire seconds later because I was freezing. Cooked and ate some of my carrots to restore a bit of my health and decided to wait until daytime. I didn't want to spend any more time in the desert, so very quickly I made a science machine, an alchemy engine, and a thermal stone. A great amount of my sanity was restored due to all of the new recipes I crafted. I also crafted a spear before leaving the desert. With the thermal stone in my inventory, it was as if my run gained some warmth as well. Thus, my journey had begun. Moreover, I spent the nighttime gathering resources at peace. The following day, I made my way to the savanna biome and made myself a pair of earmuffs. It's been an honor, Garland. I got myself a full stack of grass, and by nighttime I made a second science machine because I had forgotten to craft some essentials. Backpack, for instance. Here's a funny thing I didn't know. A beefalo hat is superior to a winter hat in terms of keeping you warm, yet the winter hat requires an alchemy engine to be prototyped, and the beefalo hat doesn't. If you have any idea why, let me know in the comments. Next step was getting my hand on a lantern. Therefore, I entered a nearby cave entrance, gathered enough light bulbs to craft a lantern and fuel it, and got out. I'd spend around a day exploring near the cave entrance in addition to collecting supplies, but it's not anything out of the ordinary, so we're moving on. When I got out of the cave, I spent more time catching a couple more rabbits to craft a second pair of earmuffs, just in case. Then made my way back to the alchemy engine, which I'd placed in the desert, and for a moment thought about basing here, but since I was able to craft a lantern, I could have explored more together with looking for a possibly better location, thus decided not to. To be honest, at this point, the challenge was over. I had everything I needed to play like usual. Backpack, earmuffs, thermal stone, lantern, tools, weapon. Slightly later, I crafted a grass suit too. 3 days later, winter ended as well, and like I said before, I didn't have a deer clubs to fight because she didn't have enough time to spawn. Conclusion, this was kind of difficult. Now I know, there are many ways that you can spice up the ST and make this game even more difficult than it is by default. You can install mods like Eat Your Veggies or Uncompromising mode. You can start a lights out world, along with tweaking settings to the extreme. Even playing some characters for the first time is extremely challenging. But coming back to Don't Starve Together after a long time, this was my way of turning things around a little bit, making me rethink the ways I approach things, instead of doing what I do all the time. Also, I'm open to suggestions, so if you had any idea, a way of challenging me if you will, not that I think you could anyway, let me know in the comments. If you've made it to the end, this is my first video and I've put great effort into making it. So if you enjoyed it, leave a like and maybe even consider subscribing. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, farewell.